Good morning, and welcome to Lopes on Movies. My name is Joey Lopes, and today I am joined by Connor.
Hey, Joey.
And Mark.
Hi.
Well, gentlemen, it's come to this.
Somehow.
Yeah. Last week we ended our episode with a little bit of a preview of what we were intending to talk about this week. And of course, that topic is Star Wars. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that talking about Star Wars is both a blessing and a curse. It's a can of worms, is what it is.
Yeah, intense.
I would say Star Wars is probably the single most interesting multimedia franchise in the history of things. And it's an endless well of interesting things to talk about. But
not for the reason that most people would think, though.
Right.
I don't think your implication is the same as what most people would take away from what you just said.
I'm not saying that because I think it's amazing or anything. I'm saying that just in terms of everything about it.
Yes.
Which doesn't really narrow it down, but what we're going to do here today is something a little bit different from all of that. Because as I said, Star Wars is this massive, fascinating multimedia beast. But in 1977, Star Wars was just a movie that came out in theaters. And what we're going to talk about is that movie, Star Wars. Currently known as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. But back then, it was just Star Wars. And Mark, I know you want to talk about this a little bit. But when we talk about Star Wars nowadays, because it's very hard to separate the films from everything we know about Star Wars, because it's so ingrained in the culture in so many ways. There's so many things surrounding Star Wars that everybody knows just through cultural osmosis. Mm-hmm. So it can be really hard to distance yourself from that and say, okay, I'm just going to watch this film called Star Wars and just take it at face value. So
I wish I didn't know anything about Star Wars and watched this just to see what it was like, because it is involuntary. It enters into your head like the what is it? The garbage pit thing. I'm like, I feel like at some point somebody was like, yeah, that monster is there to clean or like to recycle or something. And that entered in my head. It has nothing to do with the scene. And it's just like, I just want to, or like, especially egregious is everything Obi-Wan says and a lot of the stuff that takes place on Tatooine in general, because that is the skeleton of the rest of the entire saga. Like, every single word in that has been extrapolated on and made into another movie at some point. It's insane. Yeah. And it's so aggravating because it's like, you want to listen to what he has to say. Like Obi-Wan just talking about reminiscing old times with his friend Anakin and not think about the prequels or anything to do with the rest of all that stuff. And just be like, okay, at this point, they were pretty much just like, he was basically like maybe a beat cop or something, and he just had his he had his friend Anakin that he spent a lot of time with, and they were like, you know, patrol buddies or something. I don't know. They were war buddies. It has nothing to do with everything else. I don't know how to put this other than it's literally impossible to separate what Star Wars has become from what this movie was, but we're going to try our best to just pretend that the rest of it doesn't exist at all and talk about it in starting in a few minutes.
Yeah. So
pretending this is a standalone film.
I agree. So one way that's a pretty good that we tried to do it is this is kind of going to work as like a companion piece to the last show we did, which was Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, which has some. It inspired Lucas in a lot of ways for the original Star Wars. And if you just think about it as the original Star Wars, you have the Hidden Fortress in your mind also. That, at least for me, helped drown out some of the noise of Star Wars. When I did that, at least, which helped. But you are right. It is very difficult to get all of the rest of it out. You know, those scenes you're talking about with Sir Alec Guinness, just Like the way he was just able to deliver those lines, he's such a masterful actor. All that lore was just inspired just from the looks he was giving, and like
Yep.
just like he probably saw it on the script. There was nothing in there that said reminisce about it this in such a way. They were like, but those looks just kind of made it like, you know what, we can do such different things with it. We can do this and this, and then it just exploded into this just nonsense that
Yep.
that it became. But when you just are looking at the Star Wars, and that's it,
Yeah.
I think it's very valuable, and I think it's very interesting because this is one of the because George Lucas didn't direct that many films. George Lucas didn't. He directed American Graffiti to start. That kind
Well,
of put him on the map.
he also
all right,
did-
THX. He did his
movies
student
before
film,
that.
right? Right. He did some student films and some independent things that not many people have seen. And then his first one that got him on the map was that American Graffiti movie. And then he did this one. And then he didn't direct the sequels to this. He didn't direct The Empire Strikes Back, and he didn't direct The Return of the Jedi. He didn't do those. And he did the prequels. So this one is very interesting to see actually Lucas as a real filmmaker on location and doing things. It's very interesting when you're looking at it from that perspective. I think George and Joey, I know you love to talk about George, and Mark, you too, actually. George Lucas is a fascinating person. And
He's
I
just
think there's-
one of the elements of what makes Star Wars so endlessly interesting to talk about. George Lucas himself is an endlessly fascinating topic.
He's a
yes,
very
so there's so
interesting
many different
character.
ways we can go here, which will not involve going into the lore of Star Wars, which is just the worst.
Yes.
Well,
That's what I
before,
hate so much.
Yeah, but before we really dig into Star Wars, I just wanted to kind of explain the whole rationale behind not thinking about Star Wars lore, because as we said, when you're just trying to watch a movie regularly, right? Let's say you just go into the movies on a random day and you want to watch a movie. Most movies that you're going to see do not have the burden of anything that happened before or after that movie to deal with. You just go into it and you view it as an experience. It's just, you're in the theater for that duration of time, you're in your house, wherever you're watching it, and you're just engaging with this piece of art for what it is for that time, and then it's over, right? But I think that's kind of the purest way to experience a movie. And with Star Wars, I feel like because the franchise has gotten so massive and there's so much the lore that people know, and there's all these conversations about things that are happening that have nothing to do with the movies themselves, it becomes really difficult to just step back and view Star Wars as a movie. But the reason why I think that's valuable to do is not just because I think it's a very good movie, and I think, whenever people talk about Star Wars and talk about like what's the best Star Wars movie, like the conversation is never framed as like what is like the best movie out of these movies. It's always what is the best Star Wars movie, right? What is the best chapter of this saga, right? And people always say like, oh, Empire Strikes Back, it's like the darkest chapter of the saga. But it's like, to me, I'm not concerned about the saga. I don't care what happens after Star Wars, and I don't care what happens before Star Wars, because when Star Wars came out, there was nothing like that. Any idea about the future of that series or anything that was happening in the background was at best a figment of George Lucas's imagination and nothing concrete. Everything was very loose. And I say this all the time to people that aren't aware, but the whole idea of like massive things like Darth Vader being Luke's father, that's not something that you can go into watching Star Wars assuming is true. But everybody does that now because that's just what the story has.
Yeah, like even right before
got
this,
settled later.
I read how many. We were reading over scripts, like how many different versions of the script where there's the characters' names are used all over the place, and they're different characters entirely. Like it's like he didn't have this all planned out.
There's
It's
also
not what
versions
happened.
of the Empire Strikes Back script where, everybody knows in Empire Strikes Back that Obi-Wan appears to Luke as a Force ghost, right, on Dagobah. But, so did Anakin Skywalker. It was Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father, appearing to him as Force ghosts in the Empire Strikes Back original scripts.
Yeah.
Now, at some point during that process, Lucas got the brain blast idea to make Darth Vader Luke's father, which would be, a very interesting move for sure. But the point is, when you're watching Star Wars, when you look at Darth Vader, you can't be depending on how you're watching it, that is. Like, if you're watching it as part of the franchise, then yes, okay, fine, he's Luke's father. But if you're just watching it as a movie, then you have to keep in mind that, like, that may or may not actually be true. And more than likely, that wasn't even something George Lucas was considering, and it has no bearing on the story of that movie at all anyway. So it's the kind of thing where I don't think people tend to rewatch Star Wars with that mindset. But when you do, it's such a wonderful, just self-contained space opera, like Western movie. Like there's this really, like, you can tell that Lucas did his homework on making this kind of film, and you can tell that he really studied Akira Kurosawa and studied Sergio Leone and was like, how can I do something like that, but setting it in this, like, space setting based on these adventure serials I loved watching when I was a kid. So there's this really, like, great kind of just energy and like cross-cultural collaboration going on inside George Lucas's head from all these different filmmakers and ideas that resulted in this one very, very wonderful film. And if you just separate that from the lore and the canon and everything that happens with Star Wars nowadays, and by God, please separate it from everything that's happening with Star Wars nowadays, it really is just a wonderful experience. And it's why I always say, like, my favorite Star Wars movie is Star Wars, because it's the one that it's the only one that is unburdened by the legacy of Star Wars. It has nothing to do with the franchise if you watch the original version, which I think is so then, it was one of the
now that gets to
parts.
the main thing. The thing that's difficult, Joey, is that there's the original Star Wars is not easy to find.
No, it is not.
The movie that came out that was called Star Wars, there's almost no prints of it that are out, that are on streaming services. You can't go on Disney Plus, if you have that service and watch Star Wars as it originally came to people in 1977. No, you can't. You watch Star Wars Episode 4, which I'm pretty sure is also the version that was re-released in 1997 with all the Lucas's, like, special enhancements or his, which are
not great.
Interesting. And
to be fair, he has actually tweaked the movie over the course of decades since then as well. Like, all of the DVD releases have subtle differences. Like, he hasn't let it alone.
Right. So we didn't watch that. We watched as close to the original version as we could.
So the one thing that's great about Star Wars and its massive popularity is that there are so many people that are dedicated to making sure that every single thing about Star Wars, its history, and the movies themselves are preserved for all eternity. I always think of it's like the Beatles, where if you want to know how any random Beatles song was written, when it was recorded, who was on the recording, you can get that information because of how massive they were and how much information just became public knowledge. The same is true for Star Wars. If you want to know what Lucas's third draft of the original script of Star Wars was like, you could Google that right now and find it and read the entire thing. Everything is available. So the one thing that is really lovely about the fans of Star Wars is that they've worked very hard to make sure that it's possible to watch Star Wars as it was originally intended, or as it was originally released. So there are fans that have pulled together different resources that they found that preserve the original cut of Star Wars with all the unedited enhancements and mash them together into this, what they call a despecialized edition, which is basically taking the Blu-ray release of Star Wars that you can get, which is a special edition version of the movie, but removing all of the special edition changes and trying to recreate the original movie as it was released in 1977 in a high definition format. So there is a version of that exists online, and if you're ever going to watch Star Wars as Star Wars, I highly recommend that you seek that out. Obviously, like, we couldn't provide you such a link, but we can tell you to search for it yourself. And it's definitely the way to go, because I think one thing that helps you get into the mindset that you're just watching a movie and you're not watching, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, is to watch it when the title crawl comes up. It says Star Wars, and then it just starts telling you about the story. It doesn't say Episode 4, A New Hope. It doesn't imply that there's anything else going on. It's just Star Wars. That's all it is.
There aren't rocks in front of R2-D2 for some reason on Tatooine.
Oh, that was the infamous
There are
rocks.
some fascinating changes that were made.
I think it's just little things that Lucas would see and be like, oh, I gotta fix that. I gotta change
I
that.
got a first time.
But that's always a very fascinating question too. Of like, well, he is the guy who made the movie, right? So shouldn't he have the ability to make those changes? And the answer is, well, yes. I mean, it's his prerogative, sure, but at the same time, just for the massive cultural importance and history of Star Wars and the impact that it had on the world, I think it's imperative that the original movie is preserved just for historical purposes. Like it feels impossible to me to even think otherwise, that for some reason that shouldn't exist. But to me, I think Lucas himself just doesn't want those versions available because he's like embarrassed by them or something, or for whatever reason.
Yeah, the practical effects and the despecialized version in general are kind of magical. Like, there's something to it that you don't get out of those later editions that just has, like you said, even the title card is something like that. But like just seeing all the goofy costumes in the Katina and stuff like that, it's really just like kind of a blast from the past. I loved it.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that I think Lucas has tried to do. It's like because Star Wars has existed for so long now, right? Like Star Wars originally was released in 1977, and it's still a massive media franchise. So I think part of the rationale was like, if we're going to continue this franchise, we need to make this movie from 1977 look like it didn't come out in 1977, right? And if you think about it, like I think that strategy has sort of worked because most people don't watch movies like that are older than like the 80s, but they'll still watch Star Wars because Star Wars is part of this, massive franchise. So people like I think if you ask any random person, the oldest movie they probably watch or have seen in like recent memory is probably Star Wars. But they're watching, of course, a special edition one, which tries to hide the fact that it's a movie from 1977 as much as possible. But that's a much less interesting way to watch this movie, in my opinion, because it is a movie from 1977, and I think it's important to at least put yourself in that mindset and experience it as the historical piece of work that it is.
Okay, well, that's a very long intro to. We're gonna talk about Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, right? Like, isn't it a good movie?
It was pretty good. I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've watched the whole thing, actually. And I've seen Star Wars like 8 bazillion million times. So I think it's always fun to revisit it and with different things in mind. And particularly this watch, as you said, Connor, like earlier in the episode, we were talking about how we had just watched The Hidden Fortress. So for me, watching this was kind of seeing like, I was almost watching it from the lens of like, how good of a Kurosawa movie is Star Wars? Because it always felt to me like Lucas was trying to Lucas trying to do Kurosawa in a way and trying to do Leone. So I was like, how good of that kind of movie is it? And it's definitely in some ways an imitation, but it's a very loving imitation for sure. And I think the thing that stands out to me the most about Star Wars, and it's the thing that's just so impressive to me, is still just the production design. Like there's elements that you could definitely say look like cheap, like some of the costumes and stuff. Yeah. But you watch it and you feel like you're peering into another world that already exists and already has everything figured out, even though most of it, like none of it was figured out. It was just a beautiful creation of all of these elements that just happen to appear on screen in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, Tatooine especially. And if it actually, in general, and I guess I'll just do the quick rundown of things that I noticed that were very much like Hidden Fortress. I like that we open with 3PO and R2 as the schlub protagonists. They're pretty much those two guys, especially because we follow them as the protagonist for a good 15 or 20 minutes of the movie. And they even have the little report, and they even split up for a little bit, and they both get imprisoned and captured to the same place. It's like almost lightly lifted, but beat for beat for a good third of this movie. This being the moisture farm itself is kind of the Hidden Fortress. It's even underground, and you even have like them hiding out in there. not hiding from anyone in particular, but just kind of going about their day. You get a good sense of what it's like in the day-to-day of Tatooine itself. The general like characters are kind of more they're not one-to-one for the most part. Like Luke is obviously the outsider, fish out of water kind of guy, as opposed, and then C-3PO, Obi-Wan, and R2 are obviously the people that are more in the know about the actual story. But the droids themselves, they seem to be the crux of it in this whole comparison, but like they really feel like the peasants. They're always like spat upon. Nobody really takes any of the droids seriously. They're just kind of like on the outside looking in the whole way.
Yeah.
And then especially through the early shots of the lightsabers, they are absolutely katanas. Like, it's so plainly obvious looking at them. He's doing in that a samurai context. Thing, yeah, they're all the Jedi are samurai.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's just funny comparing after watching the Hidden Fortress and like going to that scene in particular, like the fight scene, I guess, between Vader and Obi-Wan. To compare that to the two generals in the Hidden Fortress is like pretty hilarious. You know, like just the way that like the Hidden Fortress did amazingly. Just like the way that was all the choreography of that, and it's so much longer too.
Yeah, very
long. I mean, it's charming in Star Wars to see it, but I actually think the Hidden Fortress holds up better in a lot of ways than than Star Wars.
That's one of the things I noticed while watching it, while trying to think of it as a Kurosawa movie. Like the thing that I think Lucas excelled at was the broad strokes of what a Kurosawa movie feels like. The way that you tell the story with the pacing and the editing. But I think when it comes to directing actors and specifically like getting down and dirty and like choreographing these scenes, Lucas was a little bit less adept at that element. So that's why like there are times when you watch Star Wars where you can just like look at like random like background extras and stuff, and some of them seem lost, like they don't know what they're doing, like they're confused almost. And I don't think it's the kind of thing that like ruins the movie or anything, but when you watch a Kurosawa movie, everything moves like clockwork, and he manages to get all of these elements in his films working perfectly, and he gets these incredible performances out of these actors. Whereas I feel like Lucas is, I mean, if the prequels are any indication, he's not exactly an actor's director. He's not exactly the kind of guy that is gonna, give them something useful to work with.
No.
Yeah, I think he knows broadly what he wants, but he doesn't know exactly how to get it perfectly. So I'm sure that when it came to doing like some of those fight scenes in Star Wars, a lot of it was, I'm sure that there was choreography talked about, but I'm sure on the day a lot of it was just like, all right, go. All right, let's see how it's
going to swing it around a little bit.
Yeah, just do this. Yeah, there are like the other things I would say he does a very good job in the Leone and Kurosawa influence. You can see it. There's like the very wide lens. You see the shots you see so much in the shot. Also, I think those look really good. And there's even like some smaller things too, like the screen wipes, the transitions. Like those are the like they don't see that often. Like the way that it would happen, and then just a screen wipe, just kind of where it just transitions to the next scene by the half the screen kind of just like fades away or just like wipes off the screen. Yeah, that happens in Star Wars. It happens in the Kurosawa movie too. It's I think, and that goes back to what you said, the editing. It's really good from those parts. I think the best part that Star Wars has that's not really in the Hidden Fortresses at all is that final sequence, which is like the like actual attacking the rebels run. Attack on the trench run on at the Death Star is one of the coolest parts. I think it's probably the best part.
Yeah, I still think that's one of like the best executed action climaxes ever.
It's really good, especially
with
because
the music too.
They let it
the music
play out for so long and get to such a like desperate situation and you really feel it because the rebels are getting picked off one by one. They have a couple of tries at the trench, and you get the it came from behind, and that's their main force just wiped out just like that. And Luke is the last shot, and they build up to Luke being the last hope, and he just kind of like, I don't know, they lean into it, and it sells the whole point of the movie, which is trust in the Force, this thing greater than you, that has been hammered throughout this whole movie. The like this sort of lift from Zen Buddhism kind of thing, and I don't know, I just love that this movie has an actual story to it, and that's not
isn't it crazy
in other Star Wars. It's got themes, and it's got a climax, and I don't know. I love it.
Yeah, I think, and that's actually kind of a good place to stop here. I think just when I watch that, and even just thinking about that whole scene just gets me all hyped up because it's such a well executed bit of storytelling and a perfect climax to this story. And after that, like after you watch that and the movie ends and the credits roll, like I'm like, all right, that was it. That was great. And then knowing that there's so much more after that doesn't fill me with excitement. It feels like, wait, there's more? How but they won.
Why is there more?
Over.
That's like the story of all of the rest of Star Wars in a nutshell.
It is.
I thought they won.
That ended up being how Star Wars kept going. It's like they keep winning, but somehow the Empire still exists. It doesn't matter.
It just cracks me up that like with the new ones that they made, like, you know, it's like 50 years later, and they're like, it's like the same people still doing the same stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
None of it mattered. None of it matters. None of it's gonna matter. It's just forever and ever and ever. The Rebels and the Empire. How miserable. I that's why I want to pretend the rest of it doesn't exist. This is so much better that way.
It really is. It really is.
One other thing I think is a good way to watch this is when you watch Darth Vader and you're looking at the scenes with Darth Vader, when you look at him as just like the heavy, instead of like the character that has just turned into everything.
He's like the
everything
whole point
else
of the series at this point.
Right. When Darth Vader's just the heavy, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like just to see him, he's just the bad guy in it. You know, he's not he's not even the main bad guy. He's just like the grunt of the Empire, which is like such a cooler way to look at it.
He's just a lieutenant, basically. He's just a really cool guy who comes in and wrecks stuff.
Yep.
Right. And when you do that, I think it helps bring you out of like thinking beyond everything in Star Wars, and it helps you just isolate to the one movie. If you just think Darth Vader is the heavy, there's nothing else going on beyond it, then you can kind of bring it back to just the one. It kind of, at least for me.
And the movie will help with that, because he gets a lot of disrespect in this movie. Nobody thinks Vader is anything but, like,
which is great, you know. It's just, you know, that one guy with the mouth just insulting him for his ancient religion is so, it's just great. You know, it's fun. It's a good movie. Yeah, it's a good movie. That's Star Wars.
Well, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lopes on Movies. I hope that we have, if anything, given you an alternate way of rewatching Star Wars as opposed to watching it as just part of the saga, because I think that both ways are valuable in different ways. There's pluses and minuses, but at least for my money, I love thinking of Star Wars as just this wonderful self-contained story that needs nothing before it and needs nothing after it to work and just make you feel something and feel like it tells a complete tale. So for my money, that's the best way to experience Star Wars, but maybe that's not the best way for you. I can't make you do things in your life. We're just some guys on a radio show. But I'd like to think that our suggestions are sometimes worth something.